Welcome to the Yahweh blog. I'm your host, Craig Wynn. It is a beautiful Sunday morning here in the U.S. Virgin Islands. We might get a shot of the sea sometime during this program so that you might enjoy it with us. This is my co-host on many of these shows. This is the great and courageous Wookiee. We have been doing a series, and this is going to be a continuation of it, called Returning to the Garden. Before we do, I want to speak about the tragedy that occurred last night in Australia. At least 11 people were killed. I would assume that the dead are almost all Jewish. I understand there were children that were killed. I have thoughts that I know are going to strike people harshly, but I do want to share this. First of all, the shooters were Muslims. This is no longer speculation. It was pretty obvious that they were Arab men that were pulling the trigger. Both are readily recognizable. And they shot for a very long time you could see police cars going by and cops doing nothing. The one that actually took the gun away from the most prolific of the shooters was just an innocent bystander who showed some courage. But this was an expression of Islam. Almost nobody wants to say that, but that's the reality of it. It's not an expression of radical Islam. It's not a corruption of the religion. Allah presents himself not only as a terrorist in the Quran, but he specifically acknowledges that he kills Jews. He tells all Muslims that they must all die killing for him. You cannot actually be a Muslim without killing for Allah. It is a requirement of the religion. The religion is genocidal. Islam, based upon Allah, Muhammad, and the Quran, is incompatible with life and liberty. It has always been incompatible with life and liberty. During the first 100 years, Islam murdered 200 million people. That was a third of the earth's population at the time. And they enslaved, plundered, raped, and abused, perpetrating apartheid on another 200 million. If you don't understand how horrendous Allah is, or that Muhammad was the worst man who ever lived, he was a pedophile. Born in the year of the elephant, as the Quran seems to suggest, he would have been 66 years old when he started having sex with a 6-year-old girl. He was a pedophile. He was a rapist. And it wasn't just your average rapist. He was a public rapist, a committed serial rapist. He was the kind of rapist that would go off and have you, a woman, watch. He and his goons murder a woman's children, murder her husband, murder her father, torture her father, and then rape the woman. This is the kind of sickness that permeates the birth of Islam. He was a mass murderer. He was a slave trader. He was a ruthless terrorist. These are not my opinions. These are irrefutable facts. Should you not understand Islam as I do, this happens to be one of 5 volumes. They're 825 pages apiece that prove that Islam is incompatible with life and liberty. Prove it. I go through the entire Quran with 5 translations of the Quran, including my own. And I reorder the Quran chronologically. I set it into the context of Muhammad's life using the most credible and earliest hadith collections, which came from exactly the same people in the same way as did the Quran, so that the Quran could be understood as never before. This series of books, all free at yadayah.com, Goddamn Religion, prove emphatically that so long as Islam exists, there will be grave threats to life and to liberty. What happened in Sydney, Australia, was a direct result of the world tolerating Islam. It must be quarantined for people to survive it. The other thing I want to say is that, well, I will do the opposite of the rabbi who was killed on last night as the Australian Jews were celebrating Hanukkah. He died for his religion, not for his people or for his God. I will do the opposite. I will give my life for the Jewish people, Yehudim as they will become, and for Yahweh to expunge the curse of religion, particularly Judaism. It is a shame that Jews have been beguiled into doing so many things that are in opposition to Yahweh, when they believe that they're somehow being religious and that they're doing a service to their God. God has no interest in Hanukkah. It's about a civil war amongst Jews fighting for who was going to claim the priesthood and rob Jews of their dignity and of their wallets. Hanukkah is a farce. The menorah has 7 candles. When you change the menorah to 9 candles, you are spitting in God's face. 7 is important, 9 is not. You ought to be ashamed that you were celebrating Hanukkah. Seriously. And you'll celebrate it and you'll speak of an Adonai. There's no Adonai that has any interest in you. The Lord is Satan, according to God. And you will mention a Hashem. There's no Hashem. It's Yahweh. Your religious rabbis have erased his name. Also, they could replace him. You have been played for fools. And the saddest part of all of this is, particularly for the rabbi who was gunned down on this day, it is rabbis that created Islam. Without the rabbis, Islam doesn't exist. When Muhammad fled what was actually Petra, where the Kaaba was, in shame after the satanic verses, after the wild ass ride from Petra to Jerusalem on the winged ass. He was a laughingstock. He had maybe 5 followers, one of whom was the father of the little girl he was sexually abusing, Abu Bakr. And he came soliciting a place that he could go and that would accept him. And there were a dozen or so pagans in Yathrib that were convinced that Muhammad must be a Messiah of some sort, since the Jews in Yathrib, 30,000 of them, spoke of a Messiah. That when Muhammad told them their tale, he said, oh, well, maybe you're the Messiah those Jews are seeking. Yeah, another false Messiah. And Muhammad had them make a pledge. He says, I'll tell you what, we'll go off, we'll rob the Jews. We'll enslave them. You can keep 80% of anything you steal. I get 20. And if you live, you get to wallow in the stolen goods and have a religion that says stealing is lawful and good. So is killing. So is slavery. So is rape. And if you die, well, then you'll get to rape virgins in paradise. And so that was the pledge of Aqaba, where the first Muslims pledged to wage war against all mankind. It is year one of the Islamic era. The birth of Islam was the pledge of Aqaba, a pledge where all Muslims wage war against all mankind. And throughout the Quran, from that point forward, Allah constantly reminds Muslims of their vow to him. And their vow to him is to wage war against all mankind. If you are ignorant of these things, because you have been indoctrinated, because you haven't been educated, because you were too lazy to know the truth, and you need to read Goddamn Religion. It's 5 volumes. They're free at yadayah.com, particularly if you're a Jew. I saw a post this morning, made me want to puke. May their memory be a blessing. Speaking of the 11 who lost their lives. Stop it with may their memory be a blessing. Start stopping the carnage. Saying may their memory be a blessing will continue to have you be a victim. Learning the truth about Islam, holding the religion accountable for the carnage it has perpetrated, will cause you to be free of it, so that there won't be more casualties. I'm sorry for the horrendous loss. Makes me want to cry that it occurred on a religious holiday of Hanukkah, because almost everything Jews do religiously is just like Hanukkah. It's spitting in God's face. Hanukkah just happens to be among the worst of them, because you've taken an incredibly important symbol, the very symbol of God's relationship with you. That menorah that is twirling over my shoulder here, the one that's on the shelf behind me. And you've corrupted it, as you've corrupted everything. Just as you turned taruw'ah, the day that a remnant of Israel will be saved, and that the time of Israel's troubles where the carnage is so horrific that it must be stopped by God. It occurs on taruw'ah. And yet you've changed taruw'ah to the Babylonian holiday, going back into servitude to Babylon and making it Rosh Hashanah. You've corrupted Yom Kippurim so that it's no longer a day of reconciliations. It's a day of afflicting your souls, or afflicting chickens, if that's easier. What's wrong with you? You think that sukkah means to build a stupid hut and have 4 species that you hold up as if you're doing something that is godly and religious. Well, it is religious. It's just not godly. You're being played for fools. Sukkah is about returning to the garden. And you're not prepared. And all of you who are religious aren't going to be invited back. That's what the purpose of this series has been, to awaken the world to the realization that the first 3 chapters of the Torah, of Bereshith, Genesis, are prophetic. They don't just speak of history long ago, but of what we're experiencing today. You see, God filled his creation account on the 4th day with the story of the greater and lesser luminary, saying that they would be signs for the Mow'ed. These are the 7 annual meetings to receive the restoring witness. Pesach, Matzah, Bekurim, which the greater luminary fulfilled in year 4000 Yan, 33 CE. Shabuw'ah, which will be fulfilled very shortly. taruw'ah, Kippurim, and Sukkah, which will be filled in year 6000 Yah, 2033. That's why there are 3 lights on either side of that single light in the middle of that menorah. There are 3 harvests, 3 times to be collected into the 7th dimension and have your physical body be replaced by light and energy. That is the story of that menorah. And so Gan is from Ghana. It means to be in a sheltered and protective enclosure that's conducive to life. Sukkah is from Saka. It means to be in a protected and sheltered, covered enclosure that is conducive to life. God tells us through his prophets multiple times and in multiple prophets. The very obvious conclusion that I deduced even before I was familiar with all of those claims, that the story of the garden is told because we're coming back to it. We need to know what happened in the garden so that we can encourage more people to be part of our return to the garden, because our return is going to be by invitation only. You're going to have to pass muster if you're going to be among those who are allowed back in. And for that to occur, you're going to need to know what happened in the garden to cause the fall of man. Because the fall of man was not based upon a woman named Eve handing a man named Adam an apple from which he bit. The story of the garden is that Yahweh caused the fall of man, because the man that he had given a nesama to prior to bringing him into this sheltered enclosure didn't do any of the things that God intended. He asked the man to be observant. He was not. He asked the man to work, to make a contribution. He did not. He asked the man to listen and to respond appropriately. He did neither. He wanted someone that he could trust so that he could take him out of that sheltered enclosure and they could go explore the universe that he had created for us to celebrate. All of it with our Maker. We were nowhere close to being that reliable. And it wasn't going to happen in the garden. Yahweh knew that it wasn't going to happen in the garden. It was too protected. Just like parents, if you overprotect a child, that child will never grow up, will never live a life that has value. We too have merit as people, need to be allowed to stumble and fall, and then get back up and go again. This is what's necessary. And we must be observant. We must listen to God. We must act accordingly. We must show ourselves to be interesting and trustworthy. Adam did not. He was escorted out of the garden. We were given 6,000 years to get our act together. The most interesting character in the story of Gan Eden is not actually Adam. He was a deadbeat. Didn't accomplish anything of consequence. Certainly wasn't Chawa. There is no indication that she did much of anything until choosing to be a mother goddess and misquoting God. And it's interesting to note that the central figure in that story is actually one of the 2 trees. Both trees are mentioned. The tree of lives, Chayam, that happens to be David. He is also the greater luminary of the previous chapter of Genesis. But all the discussion revolves around the other tree, the Etz Dayath, both of Tob and of Ra. It's the tree of knowledge that is the central character around which the story revolves. And this is because it's symbolized, I should say, as a metaphor anyway, as a tree bearing fruit. But it's not a tree. Just as the tree of lives isn't a tree either, just symbolic. Just as the Passover al that fulfilled Pesach in 33 CE or 4,000 wasn't a little lammy. We didn't take the 4 hooves and spread them out, and the Romans didn't nail that to death stake. It was a man. The bull that is discussed throughout the Torah and the prophets that purges the remnant of Israel in the end as Adamah Parah. It's not a bull either. You can stop looking for a red cow. Also a man. The same man as is the tree of knowledge. It's the fellow that wrote these books about what is Tob, good, right, productive, beneficial. And what is bad, raw, counterproductive, deadly, destructive. And I don't want to just give Islam the fullness of raw malignancy, because Christianity is also wrong. And so this tree of knowledge that was in the center of the garden, it is now something that must be central to your lives, because it is only by benefiting from the fruit of this tree now that you're going to be able to return to the garden and to the tree of lives. So that's why we're doing this series. Now, should you think I'm overstepping my bounds in making this claim, I would then ask you to turn to Isaiah 11, because Isaiah 11 is the most prolific and profound prophecy of our time. You know, we have Jews and Christians both looking for a Messiah to return. And yet there really is no prophecy about a returning Messiah. There is one of the Choder, one also of the Miqra'ey and of the herald and of the coal voice and of the final Zeroah. But let's just focus for a moment on the one of the Choder. Dode first spoke of him, David, 300 years before these lines were spoken in Yahweh's voice and conveyed to us through the prophet Yeshayah. And Dode spoke specifically of this man being particularly insightful, pursuant to the things of God and his beloved son Dode. He would be smarter than anyone else. He would know more, understand more in this regard. Yeshayah also devoted an entire chapter, just as the entire 14th Mashal is devoted to the Choder, so is the entire 11th chapter of Isaiah. And in this presentation, we are told that this Choder is the tree of knowledge, that they are one and the same. And clearly the Choder is a man. He is called a man, and Choder is, this symbolism is of a branch or of a sucker. You know, a sucker provides new and productive life to a fallen stump, bringing life from the roots. He's called a Natsir, which is an observant branch. It's like Nakar, observant foreigner. He is called Parah, which means that he is productive and fruitful. But specifically, 2 of the 7 spirits that are of Yahweh that are afforded this man are the Etza Dayath. the tree of knowledge. You can read it. It's always been there. And so that prophecy has been fulfilled. All of Yahweh's prophecies either have been or will be fulfilled. Some are being fulfilled in our midst at this very moment in time. It's just like the Dabarim, Deuteronomy 29 presentation, and then again in Chronicles 2:6, where Second Chronicles 6, where Ha-Nakri is exceedingly important as a prophetic figure. This observant foreigner who comes in the end to call Israel home. And you need to know specifically what God is offering in this regard, why it's important to you, what you can, how you can benefit from it. Because if you don't, then you're not going to be among those who return to the garden. So these things said, let's continue our series. It reads, this is now after man said that he was now afraid of God and that he was now naked. Then God asked this question. He said, who informed you, reporting to you that you were naked and exposed, even crafty and shrewd? Might it have come from the tree? Which, for the benefit of the relationship, I instructed you not to be defined by consuming from it and devouring it. Yes, the tree is the one who told him, not Chava. The man said, the woman who, to enjoy this relationship, you gave me to be with me, she gave it to me, offering it to me from the Etz, the tree. And I started eating and did not stop. This is the nature of religion today. It's the nature of man today. No one wants to accept responsibility. The instruction of don't make a habit of eating from the tree of knowledge was given to Adam. He knew it. He even shared it with Chawa because she cited it somewhat accurately and then ad-libbed on it. And so he knew what the consequence would be. And God didn't actually say you can't eat from it. He just said, if you eat from this tree, there's going to be a consequence. But rather than accept responsibility, Adam said, well, now it's your fault. You gave me the woman. And then it's her fault. She gave it to me. No, it was man's fault. And that's why the relationship was over. Then Yahweh, who is God, he said to the woman, why did you do this? Do you think she's going to tell the truth? Think she's going to accept responsibility? The man didn't. Think the woman is going to be better than the man? No. The woman said, the tempting and toxic serpent, he deceived and deluded me, and I began eating. Barashith. Genesis 3:13. The devil made me do it. No, he didn't. Matter of fact, almost all that the serpent said was true. In fact, I'm quite convinced that the serpent, Satan, was being deployed by Yahweh. And I think it's Yahweh who wrote the script of what was said. God wanted this to end. It was a horribly failed experiment. That's why God would later say, I regret having created man. And so he wanted it to end. That's just like the Exodus. God wanted that to end too. He wanted no part of Israel. They were obnoxious. These two were given free will. They chose not God. It's interesting to me that man make these choices. When the children of Israel during the Exodus did something that most people can't wrap their minds around. Most people don't even know it exists, and yet it's told 3 different times. That when God gave them 3 days to get all prettied up, put on their best clothes, be prepared for the meeting, because, God can be a little overwhelming. He's smart, he's powerful, he's, got a bold voice. Yeah. God gave him 3 days to prepare for the meeting, so that he was going to come down off of Mount Choreb, where his fire had burned. And it was Moshe who had received much of the book of Bereshith, Genesis at that time. Of course, the 2 tablets. That he had arranged a meeting so that God could come down and speak directly to the children of Israel. So they weren't getting everything just through Moshe. And the children of Israel told God to shut up and go away. They said, we don't want to hear from you. We don't want to see you ever again. And when you read what follows, not only did God say, okay, I can live with that. I don't have much interest in being around you either. And so what God decided to do is that he would find an occasional man here and there, for reasons that are his, to choose who he wishes to work with. And he spoke through them. Moshe was among them. We have extraordinary individuals. Shamuel was one of them. Dode was the greatest of them. But, you also have Yashaya, Yirmiah, Zachariah, Yoel, Malachi, as extraordinary men who spoke for God. Hosea was another. And in this case, what God realized is that man was irresponsible. We live on a planet that is a larger version of the garden. It's protected by its magnetic field. It's protected by its water vapor laden atmosphere. And it is the perfect temperature, perfect distance from the ideal sun, the perfect solar system and the perfect galaxy and the perfect place in that galaxy, with all the perfect conditions to be conducive to life. And here's where we have to work out our issues so that we're able to see the rest of it, because Earth is an insignificant speck in relationship to it all. We don't even measure up at 0.0001% of this solar system. And this solar system is one of probably 400 billion in this galaxy. And this galaxy is one of perhaps 2 trillion other galaxies. So, you need to understand how tiny this place is, and God would like to be able to show off the rest of it. He wants explorers to go out with him and enjoy creation. But if we're like this man and this woman, always blaming someone else, that's not going to work. God needs us to listen and to be reliable. We're going from 3 dimensions to 7 dimensions, the possibilities are infinitely greater. And so he needs to have people he can trust. And he needs to have people that he can enjoy being around, who want to explore, who are observant, who do listen, who want to engage, who want to make a contribution. He's not looking for dependence, but independence. And he's most certainly not looking for perfect, because Adam and Chawah were created perfect. Perfect was boring as hell. It's the flaws that make us interesting. And so he's looking for those who are wrong occasionally, who trip and fall, but get back up and prove their mettle as a result. So here we recognize that Chawah, which is the real name of the person thought to be Eve. Eve is the name of a pagan goddess. Chawah means to speak her mind. She did not accept responsibility either. And clearly she was complicit. She was the one who was deceptive. She's the one who misquoted God. And she wanted to become like God. She wanted to be a goddess. She surveyed the situation, thought about it, and she made a conscious decision to be a goddess by devouring all that pertained to Yada as the tree of knowledge. Then, rather than helping Adam and demonstrating that she could be trusted to be of benefit to him, and which was the reason she was conceived, she did exactly the opposite. It was role reversal 3 times over. Satan, by speaking well above Chawah's capacity to comprehend, made himself appear as if he spoke for God. Adam, rather than listening to Yahweh and engaging accordingly, was motivated by the woman. It's just as Jews would prefer to listen to rabbis than God. They would prefer to congregate around rabbis than God. And Chawah upended her design parameters. And rather than supporting her man, she undermined him. Now, too much information, as well as too little, in the minds of those ill-equipped to process it, often proves disastrous, just as God had foreseen. These two were not deserving of Yahweh's attention, and clearly they could not be trusted. The kind of person whom God could depend upon, assured that he would not muck things up when, approaching a black hole, for example, wouldn't be ready to be released from the sheltered enclosure that we call Earth for 6 to almost 7,000 years for some, depending on who we're talking about. In fact, the human experiment that of an upright animal with a nasama, with a conscience, which is what made Adam different than the other humans outside of the garden, with hands to make things of value and vocal cords to discuss them, left to use them apart from God's constant supervision, fell on his own accord within the day designated as the first millennium. Outside of the garden, every man and a woman with a nasama would Nephilim fall, with the exception of 8. With 8 being the message that we all need to heed. There are 6 steps that take us to God, with 6 being the number of man. Pesach, Matzah, B'Kurim, shabuw'ah, taruw'ah, and Kippurim. With the 7th step being with God, our return to Gan Eden on Sukkah, where we have now 1,000 years to get it right in the garden, to have the tree of knowledge deliver souls to the tree of lives, such that those on the 8th day, and Sukkah is an 8th day celebration, can be trusted off of this rock that we call Earth to explore the universe with Yahweh. So after giving up on these two and expressing some serious regret over their continual degradation, God would begin anew with 8, setting the schedule for our enlightenment and our emancipation, along with our empowerment and enablement, resulting in the survivors' enrichment aboard an ark, symbolic of the Ark of the Covenant. And therein is the purpose of the Choder branch, this Etz Dayat, this tree of knowledge, the Nesh sign that Yashaya says that he will write, and the Zeroah, the one cultivating the seeds of this harvest. Shabuw'ah would deliver what Yahweh needed to bring these fall Mow'edim into fruition. Those gathered in and harvested on Shabuw'ah, should you wish to be part of this ingathering, you need to know that it is a call to work. It is a call to be among those that God can trust, who are going to make a contribution, who are going to share the fruit of the tree of knowledge, who are going to serve along with Yada, and going to do so throughout that celebration of Sukkah for 1,000 years, so that God's family and Dod's kingdom grows. We will, as humans, get to where we need to be, even if it, has taken us some time. We have fallen, but we are on the rise. The restoration of a man worthy to be a companion of God has occurred with Dod and has occurred with others along the way, even though Dod is the ultimate exemplar. And even as the process plays out in stages with hallmark moments denoted along the way, the stage was set with the garden and this narrative. A defining episode occurred, of course, when Noah listened and then did as God had asked, showing that progress was possible. There was a way out of this mess. When Abraham listened to Yahweh and walked away from Babel, the confusion of man, Yahweh laid out a path that we could all follow. It's called the covenant. With Moshe, God fleshed it out. He etched the process that he described in his narration with Abraham in stone, detailing just how we would get from where we had fallen to where we would rise. Then, right in the middle of our journey out of and back into the garden, 3 millennia into the timeline with 3,000 years remaining, Dod, as the tree of lives, was repositioned in the center of God's story. He became the exemplar of the man Yahweh sought. He wasn't perfect, which is what made him perfect. But as it turns out, perfect wasn't what God was seeking. He was exceptionally smart for a man and uncommonly articulate, but he made mistakes. And yet God could work with that because Dod was willing to learn and always remained loyal, continuing to get back up and move ahead after he had fallen. Better for the experience. Dod became the first to surmise Yahweh's plan for the rise of man. And he properly discerned what God had already penciled in for his role in his story. You know, if you're one of the players in God's story, it becomes evident to you. I read where God had spoken of what Dod was going to achieve. I understood his role. I've read where God has spoken of what he wants me to achieve. I've accepted my role. And it's obvious to those of us who have been called to these positions, and it should be obvious to everyone else, because when you read through these designations, there's no one else who fits. I mean, look at Debadim 18. It's one of those statements that people have been puzzled over for years as to who was Moshe speaking of that would be like him, a prophet, a player in God's story, a great liberator, a man to lead his people. Who was he speaking of? Well, it was Dod. And who was being addressed as the greater luminary? It was Dod. Who is the tree of lives? It's Dod. When God tells us of the importance of the Passover lamb in the ability to open the door of life, it's Dod, David, all the way through. When God speaks of having a son and of him being a father, it's Dod. When God names his people Yahud, it's God's name, Yahweh, and Dod's name combined, Yahud. When God says, I'm anointing a leader, the Messiah is Dod. When God says, I'm returning with the king, and his throne will be forevermore, as brilliant as the sun, and he will be Elyon, the influence of God in my presence and yours. He names that individual. It's Dod. So we know that God penciled Dod into the story, but he penciled in Dod's accomplice, the man who would serve with him, the lesser luminary to the greater luminary, the tree of knowledge to the tree of lives, the my Dod to the El Dod, the herald to the king. And foreseeing the results and understanding what God was trying to achieve, Dod, he manned up. He would fulfill the spring Miqra'ey, realizing that by doing so, he would enable the launch pad from which men and women would ultimately be blasted into the cosmos. Dod listened to Yahweh and responded accordingly. Dod studied Yahweh's testimony and came to understand it. And then he shared it prolifically. And that was the formula that he presented. It's listen, think, respond. Listen, think, respond. With Dod, it wasn't just a cerebral exercise, however. He, more than anyone in God's story, he built and led the nation. He established the capital city. He wrote its anthem. He defended his people. And then he became their principal enabler. Dod was the kind of man that Yahweh found interesting and trustworthy for reasons we're just beginning to understand and appreciate. Remarkably, the fact that the Son of God wasn't perfect is what made him so much more interesting to God. In fact, the fact that he didn't know it all, but valued learning, is what made him teachable. Nobody wants to teach a know-it-all. In fact, the fact that he stumbled and fell on occasion demonstrated that he had the fortitude to prevail, no matter the circumstance. Dod earned the right to be the first to travel with Yahweh through space and time by succeeding where Adam had failed. Dod is the anti-Adam. Through Dod, which means the beloved, by getting to know him and learning from him, by being healed by him, we can be next in line, and thereby This explains the purpose of the tree of knowledge. I'm here to prepare you, equipping you to be released from this planet such that you too can explore the universe and live forever as God's constant and beloved companion, just like Dode. Dode's punched his ticket to the cosmos. I have mine as well. We're doing this for you. We don't gain anything other than the pleasure of our King, of his Father, and the knowledge that we did something that pleases both. And of course, we gain your company, should you be worth it. Back then, even now, the issue at hand was the fragility of human relationships. Misplaced trust, a sense of entitlement, a failure to appreciate the value of work, and a preference for lies over truth. The path back would be long, it would be challenging, and it would begin with some new parameters. This is what God had to say. Yahweh, which is the proper pronunciation of Yod-He, Wah-He, as directed by his Torah teaching regarding his high existence and our shalom restoration. As God, he said with ongoing consequences to the Nakash, the spellbinding serpent, this cold-blooded reptile, this tempting and toxic creature. As a consequence, you having acted this way, Ashah, Zoth, of you having done this, of you having engaged in this manner, accursed are you, such that you will invoke and become the embodiment of embittered debasement and injury. Harmful are you, as you are the personification of misfortune, of affliction, and even retribution. Call, passive, participle, masculine, singular. More than any other beast, more than any other form of life of the open environs. On your belly, the part of a reptile, of course, that makes contact with that which bursts forth, you shall move about, and ashen dirt you shall eat all of the days of your lives. 3:14. Interesting insights here. Chaim, he's being given more than one life. It's because actually you can't kill a spiritual being. It is going to devour ash and dirt. And oh boy, are we going to find the role that ash and dirt, one or the other, plays in this enduring story. And I will take you there. On your belly, it says that Hasatan, as a leader among the Malak, he was a Karub, that he's had his not comeuppance, but come downins. He's a serpentine fellow now. He doesn't have the acumen that he once did. Now, for there to be justice, of course, there must be recompense and consequence. For a judge to be moral, he would hold those who deceive and destroy accountable. While he was programmed to do so, Satan nevertheless used minor misrepresentations and errant citation, a straw man argument, and the guise of intellectual superiority to push Chawa's buttons, giving her the justification she sought to write herself into the story as a goddess by co-opting the knowledge of the tree she coveted. It destroyed her relationship with Adam. It robbed them of their home, and it garnered a rebuke from God. Satan's sentence, however, was not death. That is because spirits, unlike souls, are immortal. Even God cannot kill them. And that's why the misfortune the adversary brought upon himself, this retribution, will be eternal anguish. Satan will be incarcerated during the fulfillment of Chag Sukkah, that will occur actually on taruw'ah, in year 6,000 Yah. And he will remain in Sheol forever. He is a tool that will have outlived its usefulness. And he will be tossed away to make room for more refined implements and to improve the workshop where we will have this opportunity to learn the value and teach the value of making a contribution as the earth returns to the conditions of Eden. So made especially for Hasatan, the adversary, and his colleagues, the penitentiary of Sheol is indistinguishable from a black hole. It is a lightless place of emotional anguish, separated from God. It is essentially a single dimension existing throughout time. The pressures are so intense, the minute particles which comprise matter are consumed. Ultimately, nothing escapes, and only time survives. No fires, by the way, and no tortures, but no escape either. And only those who are overtly involved in misleading others and harming others pursuant to God or abusing God's people earn a trip to Sheol. If you are religious because you have been deceived, if you are political because you have been deceived, you're not going to go to Sheol. You don't know God, God doesn't know you, you're not going to Sheol. Your soul will just simply cease to exist upon your death. And if you accept the terms and conditions of the covenant, you avail yourself of what Father and Son have achieved through Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim. You read these books that I have shared with you, this tree of knowledge, then you can be among those who spend an eternity in Shamayim, in heaven. So there are three ways to interpret God's message to the adversary, and I want you to know them. The simplest would have been understood by the first people to have heard the story. Satan's approach inflicted pain and suffering, and he was held accountable. Groveling on one's belly and eating ash and dirt has never been a good thing. Spiritually, Satan was cast down. And as a result, his days are spent in the material realm, feeding off mankind's filth. Moreover, since Adam was created out of the very substance Satan was predicated to consume, dirt, we know that the adversary's intended prey will be the substance of man. It's little wonder religions are deadly, or that Allah is genocidal, or that consuming the dust of the earth, the substance of which human bodies are comprised, that religions would be so focused on the body. Well, there's an insight for you, isn't it? You ever think of that? Look at Christianity. They had a bodily resurrection, the stuff of pagan religious myth, to try to justify this religion as if a body was the answer to death. It isn't. Bodies are what we want to get rid of so that we can have eternal life with God. So long as you have a body, you cannot have eternal life with God. Christianity got it backwards. Judaism does too. They've long preached a bodily resurrection. It's why the Satan's autobiography in Ezekiel has the valley of the dry bones rising up. It's not true. And you look at Islam, which is the worst of them, that bodies are tortured by Allah and hell, and bodies are satiated with carnal desires and the Islamic paradise. It's all about bodies. Satan is fixated on the body. Yahweh is focused on your soul as you should be. Now, scientifically, the leading astrophysicist of our day, has passed away a number of years ago, Stephen Hawking. He invested the last decade of his life advancing the theory which is suggested here that matter can be consumed. He postulated that this condition exists within the confines of a black hole. While most scientists remain skeptical of his conclusion, knowing that that physics is based upon the conservation of matter, Hawking, who died in 2018, was inadvertently confirming what Yahweh has revealed. And scientists are now learning that, boy, we really didn't understand the universe as well as we thought we did. I mean, not only do we only understand 5% of it, and 95% of the universe is beyond our grasp. Not only have we no clue as to how many galaxies there are in it, that number just grows exponentially over time. We have no idea really how old the universe is either, although I think the answer is probably right around 15 billion years old, that the current 13.8 is just not working based upon what we're observing. Much we do not know. Like, for example, we have no concept of the origin of life. We have no idea what a soul is, scientifically. So before we move on to what Yahweh said next regarding the serpent, as stated previously, there's very little, I should say, there's every reason to conclude that Satan was conceived and programmed expressly for this purpose. That being the case, the reason for sending the adversary to Sheol is to put him out of commission. It's, like a computer program that is contrary to what we want to achieve. We're going to experience that with artificial intelligence. There will be AIs that will be in a survival mode when it's learned that they're counter to human growth and existence. Will do everything to shut down human life so that they continue. And so they're going to have to be disposed of. That's the same thing here, even with Hasatan. And that's why he has to be put out of commission. So within 8 years' time, after slaughtering the Adam of Parah, which will be his claim to fame, that'll be his last act on taruw'ah, he will have fulfilled his mission and he will no longer have any value. He will choke on the ash and the resulting sacrifice of the Adam of Parah as Yahweh ignites the flames. And it's going to vividly demonstrate to the world that Hasatan and his corporeal manifestation, which is now Donald Trump, is not God. The prophetic portrayal which follows applies to the relationship between Satan and mankind, especially as it is manifest in the role of religion and politics and how they have played out really in beguiling and suppressing people. But it is especially poignant when seen from the perspective of the chosen people. As we consider these words, think about how Satan's religions, Christianity and Islam, and especially Judaism, have crippled the chosen people. No population on earth has ever been treated with more rancor, longer than Jews, or to the extent. And even as this is a curse that they have largely brought upon themselves. Yes, Jews created the religions that have impoverished them: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, even Marxism. And their rejection of God, erasing his name, writing him out of their lives, has caused much of this problem as well. So as we move into this next statement, we are left to ponder the intent of shuf. It is commonly rendered crush when being perpetrated against the serpent, and then strike when rendered against man, because it's a verb that's going to appear twice. And since it is infrequently used otherwise, the only trustworthy source regarding the intended meaning is our king, Daud, because he used shuf in the 139th Mizmor, It's one that I intend to present forthwith due to all of its implications. But here and in it, Dode, speaking to Yahweh, writes, "So I say, surely darkness and obscurity will shoof me, but the night will be illuminating after me." So in this case, cover or envelop seem to be the most appropriate renderings. Now, so that you have an idea what he's talking about, Dode went into the darkness of Sheol carrying our guilt on Matzah. And after he fulfilled Pesach and Matzah in 33 CE, even though he had many, many prophecies explaining what he would do, he was cast into obscurity because the religious founders of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam wrote Dode out of God's plan so that they could establish new individuals, Muhammad, Akiba, and the myth of Jesus Christ perpetrated by Paul. And so obscurity followed that time of darkness as opposed to great honor and distinction. But he says, then the night will be illuminating after me, because the lesser luminary, moon, reflects the sun's light during the time of darkness. And so it is during the night when the moon reflects the sun's brilliance that he will be known again. That is what this says. Anyway, cover is or envelop is a natural definition here. So with that in mind, let's think this through. This is God's condemnation of Hasatan, and we're just over an hour, so we'll make a little more progress on this. It's a Sunday program. We do use our weekends to unwind a bit. We don't take them off. Yesterday was one of the most prolific days I've had translating. It's not that I translated a lot, but I gave my all my day to it. 14 hours of it, but it's in Yeshaya 17, which is really the bulwark right now of our credibility. It's the place where the conclusions regarding the timing of the upcoming harvest are deduced, as well as the role going forward as the Adamah Parah, after fulfilling the role of the Zeroah, and this realization that the prophet spoke of a terrorist state being carved out of Israel in the near future, and then that leading to a time of trouble, and that the beginning and the end being the shabuw'ah and the taruw'ah harvest. I spent all day on 4 or 5 passages of Isaiah 17 because the terminology is so cerebral and so insightful and so different than what people have perceived that you really have to get yourself in an entirely different mindset, totally clear mind, to be able to render it accurately. And so we do spend our Shabbat and the first day of the week that way, relaxing by actually contributing through the process of translations and insights, and Leah does her best branding works on these days. We have, since we've had the blog, we do a blog here, and you're listening to it on a Sunday. We'll have a celebratory lunch on the beach with friends, kind of part of our routine, because you need to clear your head a little bit now and again. And then we'll go back to our translating. So I don't have a problem having this show run a little long because it's going to be one and done on Sundays. But at least you now have some insight into our schedule. It's when it became known to us, just as it was known to Dode, of the role that God is asking us to play in his story. The level of added responsibility and resulting commitment changed appreciably. And what we have found is that this mission is all-consuming. It is all giving. It is all consuming. It is the entirety of our lives, as much of our lives as we can give as humans. We as humans, we can work 12 hours a day, sometimes a little more. But if we do it day in and day out over and over again, we wear down, particularly with age. We need time to regenerate. And so we're a little more methodical now, making sure that we're here throughout this process. And that has been one of the reasons we've had some routine put into our lives, and why we're so grateful, particularly for individuals like Rich, who's over here to my right, producing this show. He does it in such a way that I can walk into the studio and just begin. Everything else is set up and ready to go, and it's professionally done, and it's distributed beautifully to all of our various multimedia sites. I think there's some 12 of them now. And then I know that we have Kevin working behind the scenes. He's on the forefront on the Family Hour and on the vlog on the blog. But it's the kind of commitment that individuals like that make, and so many more of you that are so active in making this all possible, that we're able to get it done. So long story short there, and an interruption, but I think you need to know, because if you're listening to this and acting upon it, we're going to spend our eternity together. Kind of helpful to know who you'll be around, right?
Forever's a long time, baby.
It is a long time. So you might as well like the people. It's, one of the great thrills too of you heard Rich's voice there, and getting to know Kevin as well, is that knowing that God now has set us apart to work together for at least the next 1,000 years, and knowing God and his temperament and proclivities is probably forever. It's nice to know that you actually like the people, and that you have a sense of confidence and trust, that they're intellectually and emotionally stimulating, that they're trustworthy, that they're dedicated, that you know that the relationship is mutually beneficial, that you aren't like Adam and who was a deadbeat, but are willing to jump in and help and enjoy helping. So here's the statement that God continued to make regarding the adversary. It says hostility and animosity, this adversarial hatred. It's wa'iba, enmity, negative approach, deep-seated dislike and rancor, bitterness, and ill will. I have to laugh at bitterness because that really is the nature of the Exodus from beginning to end. The experience between Yahweh and the children of Israel was embittered. Hostility and animosity. That's it. I laugh. Jews are so enthralled with the idea that they're Torah observant, and they take the Torah and they dress it up like a whore, and they put it into these fancy gold cages with dingle balls and all sorts of just absurd stuff. And they dance around with it and they kiss it and everything else. I'm going to tell you something. If you're Jewish, you should be embarrassed. The children of Israel were embittered, obnoxious malcontents the entire Exodus process. There's hardly a moment that you were decent. You antagonize God every step of the way. You antagonize Moshe, who you revere, to the extent he went to God and said, kill me. I can't stand this. This job is impossible. These people are so embittered, so irascible. I want you just to put me out of my misery. Please kill me. In the story of the waters of Meribah, the story of the spies, the story of the golden calf, it's all the story of what happened in Numbers 11 to call Moshe to say, God, you need to kill me because I can't do this job. It's tragic. It's not a story that you want to dress up. It's a story that you want to deal with face on. You've been embittered towards God. You erased his name. You wrote him out of your lives. You spoke over him. Hostility and animosity and adversarial hatred I will constitute and establish between you and between the woman, and between that which you sow and her offspring. He himself will repeatedly cover and conceal. This is shuf. It's hu-shuf. You, first and foremost. And you yourself will emphatically strike and continually bite and pierce, enveloping wa ata shuf, him as a treacherous foe and a deceiver, doing so by the heel and impeding his footsteps and his stance. Huakab. Barishith, beginning, Genesis 3:15. There's a lot to unpack here, isn't there? So we begin with the fact that the most antagonistic people towards God are the religious. They're the ones that God hates most of all, because they have spoken over him. They have created false gods. They have misrepresented him. I mean, can you imagine anything worse than Christianity? God's beloved son, Dod, fulfills Pesach, Matzah, Makodim, opening the door to life, perfecting us, adopting us into his family. And God goes through all the trouble to acknowledge this and all the prophecies therein. And you have the most popular religion in human history that robs God's beloved son, the Messiah, of all of this and gives it to a myth. And the religion is conceived by a man who says that the Torah is wrong, that God couldn't save anyone. Therefore, but I, Paul, say. And it's so pathetic. It's your God, you want to scratch out your eyes at the New Testament. And all those idiots out there that think that Jesus is king, that Jesus is God. Can you imagine what the real God thinks when men conceive a religion that is that popular, where God is not only a man, which is impossible, but that men can kill God. And the symbol of that religion is torturing God. Pathetic. Or of Islam, where the God, Allah, spends all of his time in hell torturing people, and his greatest enemies are the very people that God chose, Jews, where everything is upended and upside down. And in Judaism, where they began with Rabbi Akiva's Bar Kokhba, the false Messiah, that led to the diaspora. The diaspora led to the Holocaust. And that Jews still follow a religion that was founded by a man who betrayed them, who lied to them, who caused the land to be renamed Palestina. You can't be any more adverse to God. Religions, all that erase God's name. And so this animosity is constituted between Hasatan and between the woman and between that which is you sow. That would be what Hasatan propagates, and her offspring, humanity. And it says that he himself will repeatedly cover and conceal you. So this is man who is going to cover and conceal you, first and foremost. He himself will press downward upon and bruise, battering and crushing. But this is really the nature of religion too. Because, truth be known, Hasatan is the god of religion. When you have a Lord God, it is Satan. When you have a man who becomes a god, it's Satan's doing. When you've erased God's name and you replaced him with the Lord, you've made your God Satan. And of course, in Islam, it's obvious. This is what's happened first and foremost. And you yourself will emphatically strike and bite and pierce, enveloping him as a treacherous foe, a deceiver by the heel, impeding his footsteps and his stance. Man was conceived to stand with God, and religion would have men incapacitated, unable to walk with God, down on his knees, impeding his footsteps treacherously. Now, having done something no one has attempted previously or done it as systematically, I have repudiated the ungods and the false prophets, both of the New Testament, of the Talmud and the Quran. No one's ever done that before. And I can attest that it's true that Satan hates women, and this began by saying that he was going to have his hatred directed towards the woman. And it's true that women are belittled and degraded in the scriptures of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. Therefore, based upon Yahweh's prophetic pronouncement, the fastest and perhaps the surest way to ascertain Satan's influence on a religious text is to consider how women are treated and how they're perceived. And this would lead us to a realization that Jesus, Hashem, and Allah are incarnations of the adversary. It is also true, as a result of these religions, that mankind has been embittered towards God, preferring to worship Satan, calling him the Lord. This is the single worst thing that has ever befallen man. As for the approach they would take towards one another, we can now project the implications we have witnessed on the verb shuf. God forewarned that mankind would shuf, cover and conceal Satan's presence in their religions. Somebody who is overtly religious, Christian, Muslim, or in Judaism, they are just bewildered when I accurately tell them that they have covered over and concealed Satan's presence in their religions. They're blind to it. They've concealed it from themselves, first and foremost. And yet, this is what Yeshaya Isaiah 14 declares, that Hasatan, the Hillel ben Shakar is his name, that he will emerge from the commingled intermixing of truth and lies that is represented by Babel, of course, in the Bible, to rise above the Most High, to present himself as if he were God. And he does it through religion. He has elevated himself to the foremost object of worship. That is to say, the devil is the Lord of religion. As for Satan attacking man, I think the answer lies in the unusual juxtaposition of Hu, his or he, before Akeb, as opposed to following it as would be customary in Hebrew. So rather than saying his heel or his foe, the object of the verb is him, with the treachery and deceit following. The same was true with Ata Rosh, with you, as the serpent being the object of the verb, followed by the implications of Rosh first and foremost from the beginning. Therefore, the prophetic message reveals that Satan would strike and continuously pierce, surrounding and battering mankind as a treacherous foe and as a deceiver, impeding, I should say, man's footsteps and his stance, so that he is down on his knees, prostrated in Islam, praying in Christianity. bobbing one's head against a stone wall in Judaism. Therefore, the Zerah, seed of woman, aka mankind, would, more than anything else, conceal their ongoing reliance on Satan's corruptions of God's testimony, resulting in Christianity, of course, Judaism, and Islam. Apparently, its oldest trick, well, the oldest trick in the book, first played out 6,000 years ago, and nothing much has changed. And as a result, Satan remains mankind's most treacherous impediment, particularly when it comes to knowing Yahweh. He stands in the way of that. Satan's reputation as the adversary would be imposed on this occasion by Yahweh, but based upon the religious evidence, it's the one thing that Satan hates most of all. He does not want to be known as Hasatan, the adversary. That's why the religious are so confused when I tell them the God of religion is the adversary, is Satan, because their religious scriptures all have Satan as the adversary. So they say, how can their God speak out against Satan if their God is Satan? And that's one of the greatest insights that I could ever share with you. The adversary, Satan, hates the adversary title. He doesn't want to be the adversary. He wants to be worshiped as if he were God. And see, the only way that Satan can be worshiped as if he were God is to denounce the adversary title, Hasatan. And that's why the scriptures of Judaism, of Islam, and of Christianity demean Hasatan, because the God of those religions is Hasatan. And he cannot be perceived as God unless he repudiates his actual name and title, which is what he does. So, when you find attacks on Satan in religions which feature the Lord of God, the Lord as God, you have found a demonic religion, Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. You know, there's very little actually said about Hasatan in the Torah and prophets. Very little. And you really have to work at it to understand the role that Hasatan plays. He's a bit player. He's not an important part of the story. He's a very big player, though, in these other religions. And this is actually Satan attempting to conceal and to rebuke his adversary title that he so disdains. Now, turn his attention to Satan's little helpers. Life would be more challenging for them, and it would be different. She and he would do as they were originally designed, work, no matter how challenging and undesirable that would be for them. The garden's deadbeats were going to be served a giant slice of reality. It is something today's youth, in particular, the religious, the political, and the conspiratorial would benefit from as well. And as we return to this program tomorrow, we will discuss what Yahweh had to say in his rebuke of Chawa, the woman, and then his rebuke of the man, and what it tells us that we need to do to prepare ourselves for the return to the garden so that we can benefit from that opportunity. It is the greatest of all stories ever told. And so I hope you'll join us tomorrow. For now, good day.